Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Estelle, Stella for short, was sitting in the hotel parking lot and checking her makeup in the mirror on the visor of her car. She wasn't driving some expensive luxury sedan or exotic roadster. She drove a 10-year-old Ford Escape SUV every day. After making sure that her makeup and hairstyle were checked, she started the car to go home. The clock on the dashboard showed that it was just after 11 p.m. The trip home took about 15 minutes, so she had to arrive before she told her husband Derek she was coming. On the way home, Stella fidgeted slightly in the leather seat of the SUV, thinking about the last 4 hours spent with her lover in a hotel room. Austin was 6 years younger, tall, broad-shouldered, and had the body of an athlete. A chance meeting at a Chamber of Commerce meeting 8 months ago led to a series of lunches and then dinners, culminating in a pleasant evening at a downtown hotel. These casual dates became regular evenings, and sometimes a couple of days when the opportunity presented itself. As she pulled into the driveway, Stella saw the dim light from the TV coming through the curtains on the study window. Derek was probably watching one of his shows on Netflix, waiting for her to come. After getting out of the car, Stella took a deep breath to calm down. Derek probably expected her to share some information about where she and her colleagues were and what they were doing. The practice that has continued over the past few months has honed Stella's skills. After entering the house, Stella put her purse on the table in the hallway and went straight to the office. As she expected, Derek was there watching TV. "Did you have a good time?" "Yes." "Where did you go?" "We had dinner at Roscoe's and then at Club Bell for a drink." "Who was there?" "Me, Erica, Teresa, and Julie." Derek turned off the TV and stood up, stretching. "Let's go to bed. Today was a hard day. I had to fire Robert and Angie." Stella was shocked. "What happened?" "Robert's wife got wind that he and Angie were doing obscenities. A private detective came out to them. She sued Robert, changed the locks, and threw him out of the house. Technically, Robert was Angie's boss, and this was in line with our policy of avoiding friendships. It wasn't easy, but I got the job because I'm in charge of this department. Damn it. It seems a bit harsh if they didn't do it during the company's business hours. It doesn't matter. This gives the whole thing a certain inappropriateness. And my boss was adamant. His wife cheated on him. Despite the fact that she cheated, he suffered during the divorce, and he is very angry at cheaters of any kind." In the bedroom, Derek began to strip down to his underpants, his usual night attire. Stella took a modest nightgown out of a drawer and went to the bathroom to change. She carefully wrapped the panties in a towel and put them at the bottom of the laundry basket. As she wrapped her panties in a towel, she thought again of Austin, his sturdy athletic love style. When she returned to the bedroom, she found that Derek was already lying under the covers. She slid onto her side of the bed, turned off the bedside lamp, and moved closer to Derek. Settling herself comfortably behind him, she wrapped her arms around his waist and snuggled against his back. Soon they were both snoring softly. The next day at work, Stella had a great day. The contracts for the 2 houses were nearing completion. She completed a deal that netted her over $12,000, and she had 3 shows that day. Life was good. Since she got her broker's license and started doing independent work, her income has more than tripled, equaling Derek's income as a lawyer. The closure was successful, and the management company promised that the commission check would be transferred to her company's account by the end of the working day. After a great lunch at her favorite downtown restaurant, Stella headed back to the office. She had a springy gait and a smile on her face as she walked through the front door. Looking at her cute little receptionist, Stella was surprised to see fear flash in the beautiful young woman's eyes. Before Stella could go to the counter to find out what was going on, a man got up from a chair in the reception area and called out to her. "Estelle Matheson?" Stella turned around. It was extremely unusual for someone to call her by her first name. "Yes. Can I help you? May I see your ID, please?" "For what?" "This is a matter of legality and requirements." "What kind of legality?" The man sighed. "Ma'am, I have to confirm your identity before I can continue our business." A look of displeasure flashed across Stella's face, but she found her driver's license in her purse and showed it to the man. He compared them to a note card attached to a manila envelope he was holding in his hands. Stella immediately realized that he was servicing the process. It was not unusual for her real estate agency to provide services to her. Stella relaxed a little when the man returned her license, along with a thick paper envelope. Obtaining legal documents was commonplace in the real estate business. "Miss Matheson, you've been served. Thanks. I think some of our customers are unhappy with our service." The man looked at her with an almost apologetic look. "Probably." He turned around and hurriedly left. Stella watched him go, then turned and headed for her office. Putting her purse on the bookshelf, she sat down and threw the envelope on the table. There were several errors in the messages that needed to be sorted out, and she wanted to check her email first. One of today's shows was canceled, which was a disappointment for her. After sorting out the email, she noticed an envelope made of thick paper. Wondering what kind of lawsuit she was going to face, she tore open the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers on her desk. When the papers were laid on the table, the slight smile disappeared from her face. My gaze stopped at the headline of the first page, "Divorce." Grabbing a stack of papers, she looked more closely and saw her name and Derek's name. A sob escaped from her throat as she set to work. What the hell? Derek filed for divorce. Reading on, Stella suddenly discovered that the application was filed because of adultery. A shudder ran through my body. There was no way Derek could have known that. She was too careful. He didn't notice anything. Tossing the stack of paper aside, she looked at the stack of 8 by 10-inch color photographs. She felt sick as she flipped through the photos of her and Austin making love in every imaginable form, including photographs. The look of ecstasy on her face sharpened the nausea. Turning away from the table, she spat out the remains of an expensive lunch into the trash. Grabbing a napkin, she wiped her mouth. When she turned back to the table, tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh my God. Derek knows about Austin. I have to tell him." Stella dialed a number on the speed dial and waited for Austin to answer. She was surprised when a pleasant female voice informed her on the line that the number they were calling was no longer in service. The Austin company's cell phone could not be turned off. After finishing the conversation, she immediately looked through her contact list and found the number of the accounting firm where Austin worked. She dialed the number and waited for the receptionist to answer. "Higgins, Clark and Proper, consulting accountant. How can I help you?" "Austin Dickerson, please." "I'm sorry. He doesn't work here anymore." Stella was stunned into silence. The voice on the phone continued, "Can I forward your call to someone else?" Stella's thoughts froze. She heard the secretary ask the question again. Stella disconnected the call. Grabbing her purse, she put the papers and photos back into the envelope and shoved it inside. As she ran past the secretary, she almost screamed, "Crystal, cancel all my appointments. I'm not coming back today." And. On the other side of town, Stella screeched to a stop in front of the mansion. Rushing to the door, she rang the bell several times and, without waiting for an answer, pounded on the door, calling out several times, "Austin, Austin, open the damn door." Finally, after she had been banging on the door and ringing the doorbell for 10 minutes, the bolt opened and the door swung open. Austin stood inside, looking like death had warmed up. His figure was haggard, and his face was calm and impassive. There was a kind of longing in his eyes. Stella gasped when she saw him. "What happened?" Without moving or stepping aside to invite her in, Austin spoke slowly and without emotion. "Today I was fired as soon as I crossed the threshold. Something about the behavior that brought the firm into disrepute. Without warning, without severance pay, and with the promise that I would not receive any recommendations. I'll have to move and start over." "What? I don't understand. What did you do?" "It looks like I slept with the wrong married woman." According to Jeff Parsons, the senior partner, who, as I now know, plays golf with your husband almost every Saturday, having an affair with a married woman is by no means acceptable, especially if her husband is the bosom friend of the boss. Stella leaned against the doorframe. The nausea returned. She heard Austin's voice again and concentrated enough to hear it. "Go away, Stella. Don't come back. My life is full of shit right now." The door slammed shut. Stella leaned against her and began to wail. "Austin, don't send me away. You are welcome. I need you. Derek filed for divorce. I have nowhere else to go." "I don't care, Stella. You can't stay here." Stella didn't hear anything else. Returning to her car, she sat in the driver's seat in a daze and tried to plan her next steps. It took a conscious effort to start the car. Having no definite direction, Stella started off. When she finally realized where she was, she shuddered. It turned out that her subconscious had brought her home. Derek's car wasn't in its usual spot, so she pulled up, opened the garage door, and parked. When the door came down, it was dark in the garage. The house was quiet. Stella dropped her purse on the kitchen table and looked around miserably. A sudden thought struck her, and she rushed into the master bedroom. A wave of relief washed over her when she saw that Derek's suits and other clothes were hanging in the closet, and his toiletries were in the bathroom. At least he hasn't moved out yet. Much later, Stella heard the front door lock click and the heavy sash swing open. She could see the door from where she was sitting in the kitchen. Derek put his briefcase in the hallway and went into the kitchen. Without saying a word, he went to the refrigerator, filled a glass with ice, and headed for the sideboard in the living room. Soon the glass was filled with single malt Scotch whiskey. After taking a long sip, he turned to her and said nothing. Startled, Stella stood up. "Derek, I can explain. It's nothing." Derek listened, sipping his scotch. Walking slowly into the kitchen, he pointed to a small breakfast table that stood in a bay window pushed towards the kitchen. He waited for her to sit down. His voice was calm and even. Stella recognized the voice she had heard from him in the courtroom. "Nothing? I suppose so. Compared to the year and a half you spent dating Vincent, or the 2 years you spent with Carrie, or the year you hung out with Peter, the last few months are probably nothing." Stella's breath caught in her throat, and she felt as if she had been hit with a brick. He knew everything, not just about Austin. Seeing her reaction, Derek, like a real lawyer, continued. "Was it more than a connection with Jackson when you decided to open your own agency?" Stella's head began to shake from side to side in denial. She tried to speak, but could only moan hollowly between sobs. Derek waited for her to regain some semblance of composure. "You will pack your things and leave this house tonight. If you can't take everything you want, I'll ask my lawyer to make sure you get the rest later." "Stella, you broke my heart. You were once a wonderful, attentive, loving wife. You've turned into a greedy, scheming fool. I don't know you anymore. I don't want to be around you. I'm going away for a few hours. And when I get back, you won't be here." "Derek, you are welcome. I have nowhere to go. Go to Austin's. Or you've already been there. I'm not sure he'll accept you. He's not having the best day himself." The door closed, and Stella heard his car drive away. Sitting alone in a dark house, she realized that her whole world had just collapsed. Taking a deep breath, she went upstairs to change her clothes and pack everything she would need for a few days. While she was packing, her mind was working, rationalizing the situation, trying to bring at least some order to the chaos that had collapsed. By the time she packed 2 suitcases, toiletries, and a few souvenirs, she was no longer upset, but furious. She took her luggage downstairs and put it by the garage door. Turning to the office, she took a glass, put ice in it, and poured whiskey into it. Returning to the kitchen table, she took an envelope out of her purse and began to read it carefully. By the time she finished, she was already fuming. She was loudly expressing her emotions in an empty house. "That's a bad son." She looked at the divorce document again. She couldn't believe what she was reading. That asshole set her up. It took years, but he played a long game. Everything he's been doing for the last 6 years has had a purpose. She remembered how she decided to open her own agency. He was so caring and helpful. He offered to do all the legal work on the creation of the agency. She never knew that the LLC belongs to the trust and that he is the only trustee. Everything she's been working on and building for the last 6 years has gotten out of her control. Everything she thought they owned actually belonged to a legal partnership. The house, their cars, and even the retirement beach house were out of her reach. His pension was almost worthless. He financed the trust funds for the grandchildren from most of the funds that were not available to her. For the last 2 years, he has been working in partnership for pennies. Everything he earned, apart from a meager salary, was in the trust management of the partnership, awaiting distribution. She had several personal cash accounts and several personal credit cards. The divorce papers made it clear that his intention was to take everything from her and leave her as destitute as possible. Derek couldn't even tell her openly about the situation. He just suddenly blew up the divorce proceedings. Her simmering anger turned into red-hot hatred. Everyone she thought she could rely on turned their backs on her. Austin threw her aside without hesitation. Her beloved husband, Derek, manipulated her and plotted against her for years to arrange all this. The more scotch she drank and the longer she thought about the situation, the more furious she became. When she emptied the bottle of scotch, her rage turned cold and calculating. She decided that if Derek wanted a war, she would arrange it. Her life was over. He had taken from her everything she held dear and everything she had worked so hard for. It took only a few minutes for Stella to make her plan. If Derek could drop bombs, she would resort to nuclear weapons. She has nothing left to lose. With no marriage, no husband, no lover, no business, no future, she felt cornered. Grim determination gave her strength, and she set about carrying out her quickly devised plan. 2 short phone calls, and everything went as usual. After gathering everything she needed, she sat down at the kitchen table and waited. Derek arrived 2 hours later. He answered her call and was surprised that all she wanted to do was talk to him before leaving the house. After listening to her pleas on the phone, he realized that he still had feelings for her, so he gave in and agreed to meet. When he entered the house, he was surprised to see that it was still dark and quiet. He could barely make out her profile as she sat at the kitchen table. He heard her voice, surprisingly gentle and insinuating, with some slurred utterance of words. "Come in, dear. Sit down. I'm afraid I drank all the scotch. You need to find something else." "It's all right. I'm fine." "Then sit down. We'll start in just a minute." Nodding, he pulled up a chair and sat down. He saw a thick paper envelope and its contents on the table. An empty whiskey bottle and a glass stood nearby. Stella seemed relaxed. They sat without talking for almost 10 minutes. Stella had been watching Derek intently all this time. Derek looked around in confusion when the doorbell rang. Stella didn't get up, but she screamed, "Come on in, Austin." Derek was startled when Stella's latest lover walked in the door. The expression on his face when he saw Derek was just comical. Stella brought him back to reality. "Austin, come in and have a seat." Austin crossed the room in a daze and sat down at the table. Stella smiled softly. "Good. We're here. Great company. I just want you both to know that I appreciate finally finding out who you are. One of you is a sniveling little predatory jerk, and the other is a sneaky, cowardly bastard. You can decide for yourself who is who. It seems that I have no prospects. My business doesn't concern me anymore. My lover is no longer my lover, and my husband has declared that he is no longer my husband. At the moment, I'm single, I don't need anything, and I don't have any feelings for any of you. Derek, I can't believe you spent so much time and effort trying to arrange all this. Why didn't you just talk to me when you found out about Jackson? We could have worked it out. It shouldn't have come to this. Stella, there has been no return from this, and there will be no return. You know how I feel about loyalty. When you let Jackson take you to his office, that was it. It was over between us. I just had to protect myself." Derek didn't notice how Stella's eyes lit up. "Now you, Austin. I thought we had something. That's how it was. We had an amazing evening, which cost me more than I should have." The smile on Stella's face should have given her away. Austin took this as an agreement. Derek thought it was a signal of her determination to try to reconcile. None of them were ready when Stella took Derek's 9mm SIG Sauer from her lap and pointed it at Austin. There was no hesitation. There was a loud barking of a gun in the kitchen, and Austin fell backwards. With a slight movement, Stella pointed the gun at Derek. Again, not a word was spoken. Derek reacted to the first shot and started to get out of the chair. He barely managed to get up when a 9mm hollow point bullet hit him right in the heart. Flying to the side, he sprawled on the floor and did not move anymore. Stella looked at the 2 bodies on the floor and the 2 suitcases by the door. She was considering her choice. She could sit patiently by calling 911 and then endure a trial and imprisonment. She could have taken a 9mm pistol, put it in her mouth, and joined the 2 bodies. Or she could have taken the suitcases, the $100,000 that was in the safe, her passport, her gun, and gone to an unknown destination. She might have been able to escape, or she might not have been able to. Lifting her glass, she drained the last drops of whiskey. She had to make a decision.